Lena Preston didn't expect her Sunday morning to start with a man in an expensive-looking suit standing awkwardly at the back of the packed church, scanning the pews like he was searching for a way out. She slid down the wooden bench and leaned forward, catching his eye. "There's room here," she whispered, patting the empty space beside her. The man blinked, his brows lifting slightly, then nodded once and stepped into the pew with quiet gratitude. He looked out of place. His tailored navy coat, polished brown shoes, and the subtle scent of something expensive made him stand out against the crowd of regulars in cardigans and worn jackets. But Lena just smiled and turned her attention back to the sermon. Her seamate, however, couldn't stop glancing her way. He didn't know why her voice had stopped him from walking out, or why her soft brown eyes, focused so intently on the pastor's words, made something in his chest tighten. He hadn't planned on being there. Church wasn't on his Sunday schedule. But when his driver took a wrong turn and they ended up stuck outside First Grace Chapel, a sudden impulse told him to step inside. Now, sitting next to her, he didn't regret it. "I'm Lena," she said softly once the service ended, offering her hand. The man took it slowly, his grip warm. Kellan Knox." Lena grinned. "You're definitely not from around here." "Was it that obvious?" "Well, you look like you belong in a boardroom, not between Mrs. Green and me." Kellan chuckled, glancing at the gray-haired woman on Lena's other side, who was now busy chatting with someone about lemon bars. "I guess I'm a little overdressed." Lena grabbed her coat. "A little? You look like you just stepped out of a magazine." Kellan looked down at his clothes, amused. "I had a meeting this morning. Thought I'd stop in." That wasn't a complete lie. He'd been on his way to look at a commercial property he was thinking of acquiring. But he hadn't told anyone he was stopping at a church. Not his assistant, not his board. No one. "First time here?" she asked as they stepped out into the chilly air. "Yeah. Well, if you come back next week, I'll save you a seat again." He didn't hesitate. "I'll be back." They stood there for a moment, neither moving. Then Lena's stomach growled, loud enough that they both laughed. "There's a diner around the corner," she said. "I usually go there after service. They've got decent coffee and the best pancakes in town." Kellan tilted his head. "Are you inviting me?" She shrugged, teasing. "I'm letting you follow me if you want. But only if you're not allergic to butter. I think I'll risk it." Inside the diner, they slid into a booth by the window. The server, a woman named Patty, winked at Lena. "You bringing in new faces now?" Lena smiled. "This is Kellan. He's new to town." Kellan raised a brow at her but didn't correct the assumption. Over coffee and pancakes they talked. About everything and nothing. Lena told him about her job as a teacher's aide at the local elementary school. How she helped run the after-school art program and sometimes sang in the church choir. He told her he worked in property development, skipping the part where he was actually the CEO of Knox Holdings, a multi-million-dollar real estate empire based out of Manhattan. He didn't want to see that look. The one people got when they realized he had more money than most small countries. With Lena, everything felt normal, and he hadn't felt normal in years. "So," she said, sipping her coffee, "are you really planning to come back next Sunday?" Kellan leaned back in the booth, watching her. "I wasn't. But now I can't think of a better way to start the week." A blush crept up her neck, and she looked down at her plate. The next Sunday he was there again, and the Sunday after that. By the fourth week, Lena didn't even have to offer the seat. He just slid in beside her like he belonged. They started grabbing breakfast after every service. Then lunch on Saturdays. Then weekday coffees when Lena had time after school. It didn't take long for people to notice, especially her neighbor, Mrs. Green. "You've got a glow about you," she told Lena one afternoon as they both left the church. "That man's got kind eyes." Lena smiled but didn't say anything. She didn't want to jinx it. Kellan kept things simple. He never talked about money or his business. He asked a lot of questions about her students, her small apartment, her dreams. He really listened, and Lena found herself looking forward to every moment she got to spend with him. But something still felt like a mystery. Like he was holding back. One Friday evening, after their usual dinner at the local Italian place, Lena turned to him as they walked outside. "Kellan, who are you really?" He stopped. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you show up in a custom coat, you drive a car with tinted windows, and I swear your shoes cost more than my rent. But you never talk about yourself." "Not really." He hesitated. "Would it matter?" She looked at him, her voice softer now. "Only if you're hiding something that could hurt me." Kellan exhaled and looked down, then back at her. "I'm not married. I'm not a criminal. But yes, I've been holding back." "Why?" "Because the last time someone found out who I was, they stopped seeing me. They saw the money, the company, the headlines. Not me." Lena crossed her arms. "So what is it? Are you famous or something?" "I'm a millionaire. I own Knox Holdings. It's a real estate company." She blinked. "Wait, like the Knox Center downtown?" He nodded. Lena took a step back. "Are you serious? I didn't want to tell you like this. I just liked being normal with you. You're the first person in years who hasn't looked at me like I'm a walking bank account." Lena stared at him, her heart racing. "So every time we had pancakes, you could have taken us to some five-star hotel restaurant?" "I didn't want 5 stars. I wanted real." She didn't respond right away. "I should have told you sooner," he added. "But I meant everything I said. I like you, Lena, more than I've liked anyone in a long time." She looked up at him. "I need some time. I'll wait." And he did. For 3 days, Lena didn't answer his calls. Not because she was angry, she wasn't. Just overwhelmed. She kept replaying every moment they'd shared, wondering if it had all been an act. But then she remembered the way he asked about her students. The way he laughed when she spilled syrup on her blouse. The way he sat beside her in church like he was exactly where he wanted to be. By Wednesday, she showed up at the Knox Center. The receptionist looked alarmed when she asked for Kellan. But minutes later, he came down himself, no coat, no tie, just a man with hope in his eyes. "You came. I'm still mad you didn't tell me sooner," she said. "But I realized something." "What?" She smiled. "You still came back to that same pew. Every week." Kellan stepped closer. "I came back for you." She reached for his hand. "Then let's try this again. But no more secrets. Okay?" His fingers closed around hers. "No more secrets." Lena stood beside him in the soaring glass lobby of the Knox Center, her eyes flicking toward the sleek elevator banks, then back to Kellan. He was watching her carefully, like he expected her to turn and bolt. She didn't. "I've never been in a building with marble floors that shine like mirrors," she said quietly. Kellan tilted his head. "Would you rather talk up there?" He nodded toward the top floors, far above the bustle of the city. "I think I would," she replied, though her voice betrayed the nerves twisting through her. They rode the elevator in silence. It climbed fast, air pressing slightly against her ribs. When the doors opened, Lena found herself staring into a penthouse suite that looked more like a modern art museum than an office. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the entire space, giving way to a skyline that didn't seem quite real. "You work here?" she asked, stepping inside. "I live here too," Kellan admitted. "There's a second level. I keep a proper place uptown, but sometimes I stay here when I'm working late." Lena walked slowly toward the window, the city stretching endlessly below her. "This is another world." He joined her. "It's just a different view." She turned around. "Not for me." Kellan slipped his hands into his pockets. "I didn't bring you here to impress you. I brought you here because I didn't want to hide anymore." Lena looked around the room again. "Why me?" "I don't know," he said honestly. "You were just there. And you looked like you belonged. Like you were part of something I'd forgotten existed. I'm not part of any world like this. You're part of mine now, if you want to be." She stared at him, her breath catching slightly. He didn't move closer. He just waited. After a moment, she walked past him and sat on the edge of a pale gray sofa. "Okay, But if I'm going to try to understand your world, you have to understand mine. I want to. She nodded. Then come with me tomorrow. Where? Volunteer day at the shelter. I promised Mrs. Raines I'd help sort donations. It's not glamorous. It smells like wet coats and old carpet. But it matters. I'll be there. She narrowed her eyes. You'll get your hands dirty. I hope so. When he showed up the next morning, Lena was already elbow-deep in a pile of second-hand jackets. She glanced up from the overstuffed bin and nearly dropped the clipboard she was holding. Kellan was wearing jeans. Not designer, not pressed, not paired with a coat that cost more than her car. Just jeans and a plain black sweater. It was the first time she'd seen him like this, and it made something shift inside her. I wasn't sure you'd come. I said I would. You always keep your word? He looked down at the sleeves he'd already pushed up. Only when it counts. Mrs. Raines, the shelter director, gave him a once-over that suggested she didn't believe for a second that this man had ever stepped inside a thrift store. But she handed him a box of canned goods and pointed him toward the storage room without comment. They worked side by side for hours. Kellan didn't complain when he banged his elbow on a low shelf or when the boxes left creases in his palms. He just kept going, asking quiet questions about who the food went to, how many families came through each week, how the shelter stayed afloat during the colder months. Lena watched him when he wasn't looking. Not because she didn't trust him, but because she couldn't quite believe he was real. She'd expected him to fade like most people did when the shine of newness wore off. But he hadn't. When the work was done, she found him outside the loading dock, sipping a cup of weak coffee from a paper cup. You didn't have to come, she said. He turned to her. I needed to. Why? Because I wanted to know what your world feels like. She stepped closer. And it's warmer than mine. Her heart stuttered, but she covered it with a small laugh. That's mostly the broken heating system. He smiled. No, it's you. They stood in the cold for a moment, steam rising from their coffee cups. Then Lena asked something she hadn't planned on. What was she like? Kellan's brow furrowed slightly. Who? The last person who found out who you were. The one who didn't stick around. His jaw tightened. She liked the idea of me. The profile. The parties. She didn't like the hours, or the board meetings, or the fact that I don't sleep more than 5 hours a night. Lena nodded slowly. And you? I didn't like that she never asked what I wanted. What do you want? He looked at her for a long moment. This. You. Something that doesn't change when the lighting does. She felt her breath catch. That night he drove her home, his car the same sleek one she'd seen before, though this time it felt less like a barrier and more like a promise. When they reached her apartment, he walked her to the door. She hesitated with her keys in hand. You don't have to say anything, he said quietly. But I want to. She turned to face him. I don't know what this is yet, but I want to find out. He nodded. So do I. They didn't kiss. Not yet. But something passed between them anyway. Something quieter than a vow, but just as binding. The next few weeks moved like a current fast, sometimes unsteady, always pulling them closer. He came to her school's winter craft fair, helping her hang student-made wreaths in the gymnasium while children tugged on his sleeves and asked if he was Lena's boyfriend. He didn't answer, but he didn't correct them either. She went with him to a gallery opening, wearing a dress borrowed from her cousin and shoes that pinched her toes. He introduced her to people with names she'd only seen in magazines, and when one of them asked if she was in real estate, Lena just smiled and said, No, I work with crayons and glue sticks. Kellan laughed out loud and the tension in the room broke. It wasn't perfect. One night, she showed up at his penthouse after a late staff meeting and found him on a call, pacing, his voice sharp and clipped. She didn't interrupt, just waited silently until he hung up. Sometimes I forget how loud it all gets, he said afterward, sitting beside her on the couch. You don't have to apologize for doing your job. I do if I let it shut you out. She reached for his hand. Then don't. And he didn't. But things shifted again the day a photograph appeared in a gossip column. It was grainy, taken from across the street, but it showed them leaving the shelter together, Kellan's hand resting against her back. She saw it first, taped to the teacher's lounge bulletin board with a post-it that read, "Is this your mystery man?" Her stomach flipped. That night, she met him outside the Knox Center. "You didn't tell me people followed you." "I didn't think they would." "Well, they did." He took the paper from her hands, scanned it once, then folded it and set it on a nearby bench. "I don't care what they write," he said. "But they don't know me. And now they'll make up whatever they want. I won't let them hurt you. You can't stop them." "No. But I can stand beside you while they try." She looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you sure?" "Yes." Lena exhaled slowly. "Then let them watch." That night, he took her to a rooftop garden above one of his properties, the city lights flickering like stars beneath them. He'd arranged dinner, real dinner, not catered, not plated by someone in white gloves. Just 2 plates, 2 glasses, and the wind pressing gently against their shoulders. "You did all this for me?" she asked, touched. "I wanted you to see the view from my world." "But only if you're beside me." She reached across the table, lacing her fingers with his. "I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time in a long time, Kellan Knox believed her. Kellan stood just outside the entrance to Lena's school, holding a small paper bag and shifting his weight between his feet. The morning air still carried the last bite of winter, and he hadn't worn gloves. He hadn't needed to. Nerves kept his hands warm. Inside, the hallway bustled with children hanging up coats and swapping stories about snowball fights and spelling tests. He could hear a girl laughing somewhere and the muted thud of gym shoes against linoleum floors. The door swung open and Lena appeared, her arms folded tight across a stack of construction paper. "You're early," she said, surprised. "I brought the muffins you said you didn't have time to bake," he replied, holding up the bag. She glanced at the label. "You went to Marla's?" "They opened at 6. I waited outside." "On a weekday?" "I wanted to see you before your day started." For a moment, Lena didn't say anything. Then she stepped aside, letting the door close behind her. "You didn't have to do that," she said, her tone softer now. "I know. But I wanted to." She accepted the bag, and he caught the faintest twitch of a smile as she tucked it under her arm. "Did you eat?" "Not yet." She nodded toward the bench under the covered walkway. 10 minutes. He followed her over, and they sat without speaking, the quiet of the early hour wrapping around them like a blanket. Lena reached into the bag, pulled out one of the muffins, and handed it to him. "Banana walnut," she said. "You remembered." "I remember everything about you." She didn't respond to that, but she didn't look away either. They ate in silence for a few more minutes. Then Lena brushed her hands together and turned toward him. "You know, the other teachers think you're my fiancé." Kellan raised an eyebrow. "Really?" Apparently, mysterious men bearing baked goods and waiting outside before sunrise send a particular message. He leaned back slightly. "Do you want me to correct them?" "I haven't decided yet." A silence settled again, but this one felt comfortable. Then Lena asked, "What's your board going to think about all this?" He looked at her, surprised. "You mean you and me?" She nodded. "You're a public figure. You live in a spotlight whether you like it or not. I don't. They don't get a vote. But they might offer one anyway. They answer to me, Lena, not the other way around." She studied his face, as if measuring the truth of that. "I've been thinking," she said finally, "about what you said the night we went to the roof." He waited. "You said you wanted me beside you. But I don't want to just be beside you, Kellan. I want to matter. I want to be part of what you're building." He sat up straighter. "You already are." "No, not just because I'm in your life. I mean really part of it. I want to help, contribute, not just watch from the side." He turned to face her fully. "What are you saying? You do development, right? You build spaces, communities." He nodded slowly. "Well, I've spent the last 6 years watching kids go home to places that don't feel safe, to shelters that are overcrowded, or apartments where the heat barely works. I know what they need. I know what's missing. And you have the means to make something better." He didn't speak for a moment. Then, "You want to build something together?" "Yes." A slow smile spread across his face. "Come to my office after school," he said. I'll clear the afternoon. You're serious? More than serious. That afternoon, Lena walked into the Knox Center not as someone visiting a man she was falling for, but as someone stepping into a new role. Not a title. Something more important than that. Partner in purpose. Kellan met her at the elevators and led her to a glass-walled conference room. Inside, his assistant had already laid out architectural drafts and a digital model of a proposed residential complex for an underdeveloped area near the West River. I was going to scrap this, Kellan said, gesturing to the plans. The city's zoning committee kept stalling approvals. But maybe it just needed a different angle. Lena stepped forward, scanning the layouts. These units are too small for families, she said immediately. And there's no green space. It was designed for singles and young professionals. That's the problem. She pointed to a shaded section. This neighborhood has the highest number of displaced students in the district. You build this, you displace them again. He nodded slowly, absorbing her words. You know what they need? She continued, her voice growing stronger. Safe, affordable housing with reliable heating, community rooms for after-school tutoring, and a playground that doesn't sit next to a parking lot. He looked at her, something sparking behind his eyes. Then let's build that. Over the next 2 weeks, meetings became a daily rhythm. Kellan cleared his schedule. Lena brought research, community reports, and quotes from teachers and social workers. They sat through zoning calls, sketched notes in the margins of blueprints, and argued over everything from window placements to laundry access. Every night they left exhausted, but every morning they showed up again. It wasn't easy. The city pushed back. Investors grumbled. One of Kellan's board members even called it a PR nightmare waiting to happen. You're investing millions into a project that won't turn profit for over a decade, the man warned. That's charity, not business. Kellan's reply was quiet but firm. Then I guess it's time we remember what kind of legacy we're building. Lena heard about that meeting secondhand from his assistant, and when she confronted Kellan about it later, he just said, if they can't see the value in what we're doing, they don't belong at my table. By the 3rd week, the project had a Name the Haven and a fully approved site plan that included 60 mixed-income units, a community center, and a youth art space designed by one of Lena's students. They held a public forum in the school gymnasium, and Lena stood in front of over 100 people explaining the vision with a confidence she hadn't known she possessed. When the crowd erupted in applause, she looked over at Kellan, who was leaning against the wall with his arms folded, watching her like she was the only thing in the room. Later that night, as they walked to her car, Lena stopped near the curb and turned to him. I still don't know how this happened. What? You. Me. All of it. He stepped closer. It happened because you offered me a seat. And you took it. I take it again. 1,000 times over. She hesitated, then said, I think I'm in love with you. Kellan didn't flinch. Instead, he reached up and cupped her face gently. Then let me catch up. She laughed, and he kissed her. There on the sidewalk, beneath a flickering streetlight and the sound of distant traffic. It wasn't glamorous. It was better, because it was real. And for the first time in his life, Kellan Knox didn't feel like he was chasing something. He felt like he'd found it. The invitation arrived in a cream envelope sealed with gold foil, tucked beneath Lena's apartment door like it had tiptoed in on its own. Her name was written in sweeping calligraphy, unmistakably done by hand. She stared at it for a long moment before sliding her finger beneath the flap. Inside was a card, thick, textured, and unapologetically expensive. Knox Holdings cordially invites you to the unveiling gala of the Haven, a new chapter in community development. Location, the Whitmore Pavilion. Date, Saturday, 7 p.m. Formal attire required. At the bottom, in handwriting that didn't match the rest, were 5 words, Save me the first dance. Lena pressed the card to her chest, her heartbeat drumming against it like a secret. She hadn't seen him in 3 days. They'd both been swallowed by the final preparations for the gala, city officials, last-minute permits, media interviews, and a flood of logistical headaches. But every night, even in the quiet of her apartment, she'd felt the echo of his presence, as if he'd never really left. Saturday arrived with a rush of nerves and a borrowed gown. Her cousin had dropped it off that morning with no small amount of squealing, and Lena had barely zipped it before her phone lit up with a call from the car Kellan had arranged to take her to the event. The Whitmore Pavilion was a glass cathedral lit from within, its curved ceiling arching like the sky had been lifted to make room for something extraordinary. A red carpet stretched across the entrance, flanked by photographers shouting names she didn't recognize. When Lena stepped out of the car, a hush rippled through the crowd and then surged into a wave of murmurs. Who is she? Is that his date? She's with Knox. Lena didn't flinch. She kept her eyes forward and walked into the building like she belonged there because tonight she did. Inside, the space had been transformed. A massive digital rendering of the Haven rotated slowly above the stage, while screens along the walls played footage of the construction site, intercut with interviews from future residents and community leaders. She moved through the crowd, stopping briefly when someone offered her a glass of champagne. Everything sparkled: the chandeliers, the floor, the sound of laughter rising like music around her. But she didn't care about any of it until she heard his voice. "You're late," Kellan said gently behind her. She turned and forgot how to breathe. He was in a midnight blue tuxedo, the lapels catching the light like starlight. His hair was swept back, his expression unreadable until his eyes met hers. Then everything softened. "I'm not late," she said. "You were just early." He stepped closer, his voice low. "You look like trouble." "I look like someone who spent 45 minutes wrestling with a zipper." He laughed, and it rolled through her like a wave. "I was starting to think you'd changed your mind," he said. "I didn't come for the gala," she replied. "I came for the dance." He offered his arm. She took it. They moved through the room together, and the crowd parted without needing to be asked. At the center of the floor, the music shifted, a slow, elegant rhythm threaded with strings. He pulled her in carefully, one hand at her waist, the other cradling her fingers. "Are you ready for what comes after this?" she asked. "I've never been more ready for anything." She laid her head against his shoulder. "They're all watching. Let them." They danced as if the world had narrowed to just the space between their feet, as if the noise around them was only background music to something much more important. When the song ended, Kellan didn't let go. He led her to the stage where a microphone waited. She gave him a look. "Don't you dare make me speak in front of all these people." "You won't have to," he said. "But I do." The crowd quieted as he stepped up, the lights dimming until only he was illuminated. "Some of you know me as the CEO of Knox Holdings," he began. "Others know me as the man who refused to build another building that didn't mean something. But tonight isn't about me." He looked down, his gaze finding Lena instantly. "It's about the woman who reminded me what building really means, who taught me that walls don't make a home, people do. That a blueprint is only worth the paper it's printed on if it doesn't serve the hearts inside it." Lena felt her throat tighten. Kellan continued, "The Haven isn't just a project. It's a promise. And I couldn't have kept it without her." Applause rose like thunder, but Lena barely heard it, because Kellan was stepping off the stage and walking straight toward her again. And when he reached her, the entire room faded. "I have something to ask you," he said. "Here, right here." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't oversized or ostentatious. It was simple and perfect. He opened it to reveal a ring that caught the light without demanding it. A single stone set in gold, elegant and quiet. "I knew the first time you handed me that seat you were giving me more than a place to sit," he said. "You were giving me a chance to belong somewhere. And I've never belonged anywhere the way I do when I'm with you." Lena's breath caught. "I don't want to spend another day pretending I'm whole without you," he said. "So I'm asking not because I need the headline or the perfect moment or even the answer I want. I'm asking because I love you, and I want to build every piece of the rest of my life with you." He paused. Will you marry me? The room held its breath. Lena looked at him, really looked, and saw every version of the man she'd come to love. The one who sat awkwardly in a church pew. The one who sorted cans at a shelter without flinching. The one who listened more than he spoke. Who never asked her to change. Who gave her space to grow and the tools to build something bigger than herself. She smiled, tears catching at the corners of her lashes. Yes, she whispered. The room erupted, but Kellan didn't seem to hear it. He slipped the ring onto her finger, lifted her hand to his lips, and kissed it. And then, finally, he kissed her. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't grand. It was steady and certain, the kind of kiss that felt like coming home after a very long time. Later that night, when the last guests had drifted out and the lights had dimmed, they sat alone in the rooftop garden of the pavilion. He wrapped his jacket around her shoulders. You know, she said, resting her head against him, I never expected any of this. I didn't either. I thought I was just offering a seat. You were, he said. You offered me a seat. And I never wanted to get up again. She laughed quietly, her fingers playing with the edge of the ring. You ready for what comes next? I'm ready for everything, he said. As long as I'm doing it with you. The city glowed below them, 1,000 lights, each one a story. But up there, in the quiet, only one story mattered. The one that started with a church pew, an empty space, and the kind of love that builds everything new. 2 months after the gala, the Haven's construction was in full swing, and Lena found herself standing at the edge of the site, hard hat in hand and boots sinking slightly into the muddy ground. The late spring sun was already warming her shoulders, and the scent of freshly turned earth drifted through the air. Behind her, workers shouted instructions, and the rhythmic thud of hammers echoed across the lot. She adjusted her sunglasses and turned as Kellan approached, his own hard hat low over his forehead and a clipboard tucked under his arm. You're late, she said, not looking at him as she walked toward the newly framed community center. I brought coffee, he replied, holding out a paper cup. That earns me at least a 10-minute grace period. She accepted it with a raised brow. This better not be that bitter roast you like. He gave an innocent shrug. It's the one you said made you feel like you were chewing on regret. Lena took a sip, then sighed. You actually listened. I always do. They moved through the construction zone together, stepping around piles of wood and coiled wires. The framework of the buildings had finally started to resemble something real, a shape that hinted at homes, lives, and stories just beginning. At the center of it all stood the community building, now with beams forming what would soon be a vaulted ceiling. Sunlight poured in through the skeletal frame, and Lena paused under the future skylight. I want to hang student art right here, she said. Let them walk in and see their work the moment they step inside. Kellan nodded. We'll need reinforced mounts. I'll talk to the architect. She turned to him. You're really letting me make all these decisions. They're not just yours. They're ours. This place wouldn't exist without you. I still don't know how I ended up here, she admitted. 1 minute I was gluing googly eyes onto construction paper. The next I'm helping design housing developments. You didn't end up here, he said. You built your way here. They wandered further until they reached the edge of the lot where a small hill overlooked the river. The city shimmered in the distance, but here everything felt quiet. Kellan sat on the low concrete wall and patted the space beside him. Lena hesitated, then joined him. There's something I've been thinking about, he said, his gaze focused on the horizon. That's always a little terrifying coming from you. He turned to her, serious now. I want to give this land a permanent designation. Once the Haven is finished, I want to establish a nonprofit one you run that ensures this project isn't a one-time thing. A long-term initiative built around your vision. She blinked. You want me to run it? I want you to lead it. You already are. I just want to make it official. And what would you do? He smiled. Whatever you tell me to. Lena laughed, then leaned her head briefly against his shoulder. You know, if you told me a year ago that I'd be engaged to a millionaire and running a housing initiative, I would have assumed I hit my head. You probably did. On me. She nudged him. You're lucky you're charming. That's not luck, it's strategy. They sat in silence for a few more minutes, the warm breeze stirring the grass below. Then Lena stood. Come on. I want to show you something. She led him down the hill, around the half-finished buildings, and into what would eventually be the main courtyard. The area was still raw dirt and gravel, a few scattered pipes, but Lena moved with purpose. I want to put a garden here, she said. Not for decoration. A real one. With vegetables, herbs, flowers. Something the kids can help tend. Something that grows. Kellan looked around, visualizing it. That's going to take work. But it's worth it. He nodded. Then we'll do it. Lena turned to him, the sunlight catching her hair, and for a moment Kellan forgot about everything else. The gala. The projects. The company. All he saw was her bright, determined, grounded in a way that made everything else feel real. You're staring, she said, amused. I'm still catching up, he replied. To what? To how lucky I got. That night, they sat in Lena's apartment, curled up on the couch with takeout containers spread across the coffee table. She had changed into one of his oversized sweaters and he'd kicked off his shoes the moment he stepped inside. This is still my favorite place, he said, glancing around the modest living room. You say that every time you come over. I mean it every time. She handed him a packet of soy sauce. You sure you're not just trying to avoid going home to your $6 million penthouse? He leaned his head back against the cushion. Honestly? Yes. She looked at him, something unreadable in her expression. What, he asked. I've been thinking too. He sat up. About this apartment. It's not really going to work once we're married. He froze. Wait, you said once? Not if. She blushed faintly. Don't make it weird. He grinned. You just said once. That's legally binding. She tossed a pillow at him, laughing. What I meant is, I think it's time for something new. You want to move in with me? She hesitated. I don't want to just move into your space. I want us to have something that's ours. From the start, Kellan leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Then let's build it. Pick the place. Design it together. Lena raised a brow. You're serious? I've never been more sure of anything. Wherever you are, that's where I want to be. 2 months later, they stood in the entryway of their new brownstone, modest by Kellan's standards, but perfect in every way Lena had imagined. Exposed brick, warm wood floors, a sunroom on the second floor that she immediately claimed as her reading corner. They moved in without fanfare. No press, no photographers. Just the two of them and a moving truck that Lena insisted on driving herself for the first few blocks. Kellan let her. He'd learned that some things were worth stepping back for. The wedding was small, just family, close friends, and a few of Lena's students who insisted on being the flower crew. She walked down the aisle in a gown she chose herself, simple and elegant, with lace sleeves and a faint trail of embroidered vines. Kellan waited at the altar, his hands steady only because he could see her coming toward him. In her vows, Lena didn't talk about fate or destiny. She talked about choice. About how love wasn't something that found you, it was something you chose to build, brick by brick, even when the ground felt uneven. Kellan's vows were shorter, but just as certain. I didn't know what I was looking for until I heard your voice in that church, he said. And from that moment, I've never looked anywhere else. They were married under a canopy of flowers, with sunlight filtering through the trees and the sound of laughter rising like music. After the ceremony, they danced barefoot in the grass, surrounded by people who had come to believe in them not as headlines, but as individuals who had found something rare. Not perfection, but partnership. Years passed. The Haven opened on schedule, with Lena as the director of the foundation that bore her name. More developments followed, each one shaped by the same principles: dignity, safety, community. Kellan stepped back from the day-to-day operations of his company, choosing instead to focus on projects that brought him joy. He taught a business mentorship course at a local college, often ending lectures with stories that began, "My wife once told me." They adopted a rescue dog named Maple, who promptly took over their sunroom and refused to sleep anywhere else. They traveled when they could. Italy, Morocco, Oregon. But always came home to the brownstone with the creaky stairs and the garden that bloomed a little brighter each spring. One evening, Lena came home to find Kellan in the kitchen, flour on his shirt and a slightly burnt pie on the counter. "What is this?" she asked, poking at it. An apology pie, he said, for forgetting to pick up the dry cleaning. Also, it's mostly crust. She laughed, wrapping her arms around his waist. You're lucky I like crust. I'm lucky for a lot of reasons. He kissed her then, slow and certain. And in that moment, surrounded by the scent of overcooked pastry and the sound of their dog snoring in the other room, they knew. This wasn't a happy ending. It was a beautiful beginning that never needed to end.